Welcome to the month of June's first The Jam session, where we explore enterprise technology across various tech domains. I'm your biweekly host, Cher the Datanista Fox. Robert Eve will be back to host the mid-month Jam. Let's be honest, data governance doesn't exactly scream excitement for most of us. For many, it conjures up images of red tape, endless policy documents, and someone in IT saying, nope, you can't do that. But what if we've been thinking about governance all wrong? In this episode, we're blowing the dust off the data governance playbook and giving it a much needed reboot. To quote Governor Tarkin in the movie Rogue One, a Star Wars story, we need a statement, not a manifesto. So in today's call to actions, bold joint statement, resetting the data governance narrative, we're tackling the big questions. Why does data governance get such a bad rap? Why are executives allergic to terms like metadata? And how do we turn governance from a dreaded chore into a business critical superpower? We're going to break it all down into 4 spicy segments: myths, ownership, leadership buy-in, and real business value. Expect some candor, some clarity, and maybe even a few governance jokes. Yes, they do exist. And if you've ever felt like governance is just an obstacle in your way, it's time to reset your expectations. So grab your coffee, crank up the volume, and let's dive into the governance glow up that you didn't know you needed. I'm so excited to be joined by an incredible panel of governance experts, 2 of whom actually wrote this call to action. So let's kick this off with quick introductions. Ladies first. Mindy, please introduce yourself, your company, your role, and maybe your favorite myth about data governance.
Hi, I'm Mindy Becker. I'm the Director of Data Governance at Right Triangle Consulting. And I think my favorite data governance myth is if you have a policy, therefore you have data governance. I think simply having policies isn't a governance.
I think we're going to get into that today. So thank you. Bob, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Bob Seiner. I'm the president and principal of KIK Consulting and Educational Services. KIK are not my initials. KIK stand for Knowledge is King. And the focus is on, my initials are BS. I didn't want to call myself BS Consulting. So Knowledge is King. The focus is on knowledge transfer. And I focus mostly on non-invasive data governance.
Yes, you do. That's actually a funny little snippet that you didn't want to be BS. You could have been RS though. So you don't have to go by Bob. You can go by Robert. All right. And last but not least, and a man who certainly doesn't need an introduction, as we learned in the pre-show, Sean, please introduce yourself.
I'm John Ladley, and I don't have an active firm now. I am semi-retired, but I'm doing a lot of writing and researching in the industry right now, and I've been doing the data governance thing a great deal. And there are books and podcasts and all that stuff we'll talk about later. My myths, my favorite thing, and I've been hearing this a lot lately, where people will call and say, I want a fabulous, exciting career in data governance. And the first thing I tell them is it's more exciting to sell door-to-door encyclopedias. If you really understand what data governance is, because at the end of the day, it should disappear into the fabric of the organization and be closer to a boring oversight function than really anything else, if it's going to be embedded and work okay. It doesn't mean it can't be exciting and it cannot be enabling, but it's just like a lot of other things in your organization. I think we've overcooked it a little bit. So that's kind of my favorite myth, and we'll probably touch on that.
I think we definitely are going to touch on that. So let's start by really addressing the elephant in the server room. Data governance is not broken, but what's broken is how we talk about it and how maybe we've misunderstood its purpose. Governance isn't about control for control's sake. It's about making sure our data actually works the way we need it to. And in your statement, you guys quote, data governance is not a failure, yet, in parentheses, how we talk about it is. So, Bob, what are the biggest misconceptions about data governance?
So how long do we have today? We have an hour, right? There's a long list.
55 minutes
I
now.
don't know. First of all, that's the perfect question to kind of kick off this session here is, what do we need to change? What are some of those misconceptions? One of the major misconceptions is that data governance is new, is that this is something that's new that we've never done before. And the fact is that your organization wouldn't have been around 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50, 100 years with a complete lack of governance. There's people within the organization who are already defining, producing, and using data as part of their job. And if they're being held accountable for how they're defining, producing, and using data, that's a level of governance. I love what Mindy said. If you have policy, well, policy kind of is governance. Well, if you have any processes in your organization, that's also a form of governance. And so another misconception is that if the executives are hearing that they've got data issues, and if they're not hearing, they're probably not asking, but if they're hearing they have data issues, these data issues will not self-resolve. They require some work in order to do it. Now, it doesn't, and we can talk a little bit more later about what it means to be non-invasive in the approach. But the fact is, the biggest misconception is data governance is new, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be difficult. The fact is, you're already governing your data, but you're probably doing it inefficient or informally. And because it's informal, it's also inefficient and ineffective. So if we can move from informal to formal, it's going to be a lot less invasive. And so the misconception is data governance is in your face and it's going to interfere, and it doesn't need to be communicated that way.
I completely agree. And I think we're all, as having been consultants at one point in time in our careers, we've seen this. We've gone in and we're like, oh, you are doing a little bit of data governance over there. And oh, you've got a little bit over there. You haven't formalized it. John, why do so many organizations believe that data governance has failed them?
Well, if you put your leadership face on and you're an executive and someone comes in and says, if we do this and you sponsor me and I will buy some tools and I will do all these things with fancy words you don't know the meaning of, and then things will be wonderful, and then repeats that 3 or 4 times over the last 3 decades, then by that person whom you've raised expectation standards, you have failed because you did not deliver on your promises. Right. So a lot of things what in the industry is what you need to understand is we have overcommitted and overcooked this, and we have to look in the mirror, because a lot of practitioners say, oh, we have a data quality issue, we'll do data governance and we will fix the data quality issue.
Yeah.
And when you don't fix the data quality issue, or they don't start to get the quarterly reports accurately, or the master data project or the AI model fails because of data quality, then you have, let's be clear, if you've committed to something to leadership and you don't deliver, you have failed. Data governance per se as a concept is not a failure. Governance has been around a long time. The concept of governance has been around since somebody told somebody to build a boat 200 cubits by 150 cubits, because that's governance. All right. That's, follow the rules. Governance is boring. It's control. All right. And your accountants have control and your engineers have controls, and government agencies do controls, and we're all very used to them, but we overcook it into something else. And then we miss the opportunity to have it be there to support the really cool things now in the 21st century we want to do with data, right? Like analytics, like AI and those things, which they have to be fed by quality data and things like that. So failure, from a certain perspective, yeah, we're tanking, okay? But it's not the concept. It's not the discipline of because governance has been around. Data is just another adjective for something that has existed for a very long time. That's why I tell people it could be considered kind of boring. All right. When you start to think in terms of controls and that, you're putting yourself with, auditors and actuaries. All right. And I've been both in my career, and you don't get many dates when you're that way. So you have to kind of that's the things you have to be concerned about. Anyway, to wrap up, it has not failed, but we need to use the right words. We need to put it in the right perspective, and we need to align it the right way so people have the right expectations with it.
That's a great wrap up. It is really about setting
Almost 3 minutes.
expectations. And we're ahead of schedule, so you guys are rocking. Stay on track. We'll have time for questions. I agree with so much that you have to say. I wrote a blog post many months ago, and the graphic was a chihuahua with its tongue sticking out of the side of its face, and it says, "Does data governance give you the ick?" Because I think just when we use that word, it just has so much negative context around it. And you're right. It's not the process that's failing. It's the implementation. It's the following of it. And I think, especially when I speak about it, we feel we relate data governance to the word government, which equals rules, which equals regulations, which there is regulate. We do try to be compliant within the data governance framework, but it just gives people the chills instead of thinking, but if we do this right, wow, what is that going to do for our company? So, and seeing, pulling together all those informalities that we are doing in our company, the little pieces of data governance. And so, Mindy, in your consulting career, what governance have you already seen happening informally, and why is maybe putting more formalization around it critical?
Actually, I was thinking about it prior to even being in consulting. I was in corporate financial analysis and I was in consumer underwriting. I was doing this job before I ever became a consultant and didn't realize it. I was cleansing data. I was adhering to data quality standards and privacy standards when I was making information that went public, and reports that were private within the company. I just didn't know that I was doing those jobs. I didn't know that I was adhering to governance standards, and I didn't know that I was constantly defining what information meant by defining markets and defining what a customer was and telling these other things, and realizing that a formalized process of that and having a catalog and having some of these other things would have made that job so much easier, because I wouldn't have been spending hours arguing with somebody over it. I could have directed them to that process. I could have made that job easier for that person. And looking back on it as a consultant, I would have been like, that job could have been that much easier for that entire role. I could have done that for that person. Like, that's what I think about now, and why that formalization of it is better, because the hours saved for companies, like, that's why governance is necessary. That's why putting those kinds of conversations forward are necessary, because companies now, regardless of what their products are, regardless of what they're doing, every company now is a data company. Every company out there is an information company. They have to start thinking of it that way, that their business needs to be driven by information. They need to start thinking about their decisions are based on this. And if their decisions are based on information, they want it to be good information, right? So how are we bringing that to the forefront? How are we making these decisions better, faster, and the processes are that we're doing to make those conversations better? So I think that's how we're getting information in these kinds of government. And like you said, people are thinking of data governance as a controlling factor, and we need to start making it as an enablement factor. Like, these are the things that are making your business better, because we're making your decisions faster. We're helping you do your job better.
And that's what we're all here to do. Bob, looks like you've got a thought on that.
I just think Mindy's example, coming from the business and then becoming a consultant and becoming, data focused, is a perfect example of all those things that she saw that could be improved, where there could be better efficiency and effectiveness. As I said when I started, these things are not going to resolve themselves. just by sitting around and waiting. So if you think your processes are going to improve, your quality of your data is going to improve, no, it's not going to improve on its own. And so governance is necessary. Yes, the way that we're talking about it is failing, but I just thought Mindy's example was perfect. And having lived coming from the corporate business world and experiencing that firsthand is a perfect story to tell.
It really is. And I think, as well as all the opportunities we have to meet with clients, we find the accidental data steward, we find the accidental data owner, and they're doing a lot of these things that's part of their job and part of their process. So they're working really hard to, make data more valuable to their company.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your Shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
So if you've ever heard someone say that's IT's problem when talking about governance, buckle up. One of the most damaging misconceptions is that data governance belongs in the IT department, when in reality, true governance thrives when it's owned by the business, where accountability, strategy, and value live. Governance must shift from a tech initiative to a business mandate. So, John, why is housing data governance in IT really a conflict of interest?
Yeah, this is probably my number one pet peeve, and the thing I tend to be glib, but I get pretty serious and pretty intense on this one.
It was in your first paragraph of your first book, John. I think you said that if data governance is in IT, it will fail.
Yeah,
Take a stand and take it early.
Right.
well, so let's do, and let's do a root cause here. All right, the root cause of this is ignorance on the part of leadership and technology people on exactly what this capability, this business capability, because governance is a business capability. It is not a sub capability of a functional area. All right, governance is by definition, and it has to be an enterprise level thought process. All right, because the whole organization is represented by reputation, regulation, things like that. So, I mean, there's no argument there. This is basic business 101. All right. Every complicated system, whether it's an Elon Musk rocket ship or consolidating all of the companies that Procter and Gamble owns to do the annual report or something like that, every complicated system has controls. Every complicated system on this planet has separation of duties. In other words, the person who's doing the work is not the person who says, yes, this work is being done correctly. This goes back to when my mother was selling Tupperware and then was funding the family budget out of her Tupperware money. And I learned very an early age that then we couldn't pay for the Tupperware we owned. And then she took the money from my newspaper route. And I'm sorry, then I told that to my counsel last week, and that's why it's fresh in my mind. Anyway, the fact is there's controls, right? Separation of duties. The organization, it exists everywhere except one place, data management. And for some reason, we say, well, it's data. There go, it's in IT. That is a fundamental. If I was an auditor, and the AICPA and FASB had the stones to address this subject, I would be producing qualified financial statement mentions on and reports, because you're violating you're violating essential business concepts here by doing that. The people that are in charge of it, the fox is in charge of the hen house. And that's why data governance is never going to work as long as it's in IT. It's as simple as that. Because the CIO, who is motivated by on time, on budget, and service level agreements, is not going to say, "Well, I'm not going to do that," because where's the bonus coming from? That's my 3 minutes. It's up.
You're a doll.
I used to be a disc jockey. I used to have to get 32 minutes of programming into a 30-minute slot. So
I knew I was
that's how
going to
that
laugh the whole way through this
Yeah.
session. So, since we're talking about the business, Mindy, how do you help clients reposition governance as a business capability?
I started asking the business what their goals are. I mean, it's first asking business, and it's aligning with business goals every time. I mean, it's not about information for information's sake. It's not about understanding data. Your last blog about data literacy for the sake of what's metadata. Do you understand what all these interesting facts about information? Although I love all the interesting facts about information now, I love every bit about it. If you cannot tie a goal, a business goal, or what the business is using information for, then there's no reason to the story. You have to be able to tie a business need to the information, and that's really how I look at information now, and that's how it works. It's always about how they're using the information, and so it's tying every KPI that way to it. And if they're getting their information faster so that their KPIs are working and the data quality and the trust in information is happening, then that's where it's going.
Yeah, I completely agree. We can't start with the data. We have to start with the business. And I think sometimes when we're pulled into situations where they think data governance is failing or they've got some informal pockets of it, we have to actually reverse engineer back to the business and then, try to put things right moving forward. So, Bob, how should organizations be embedding governance in their everyday operations and not treating it like a side project?
So before I address the embedded, I want to talk about the IT versus the business just for a quick second. When I first got John's first book, and he said that data governance in IT is if it's in IT, it will fail. I called him, I think immediately, I think within a half an hour of reading that. Say,
yeah.
John, I'm not going to call BS on it because I think there's a lot of truth to it. But when people ask me where data governance should reside, in the IT or business, my answer is yes. Somebody has to have responsibility for it. So if it's in IT and it's just for IT's sake, the chances are it's going to fail. And in getting the business involved, and in fact, in most operating models of roles and responsibilities around data governance, the bulk of the roles and responsibilities are business people. So yes, it can reside, and I think it's a cop-out when people say that data governance should reside in the business, because the business is a very vague term. There's a lot of different aspects to the business. Where in the business? And risk management? Is it a shared services part of the organization? So I think that's just
That's hair splitting. That's hair splitting. Okay. Yes, the business means somewhere else but IT. That's what
it means, right? Exactly. But I still think it's kind of vague. And to kind of address kind of what Mindy, and when you try to get what Mindy said about the question to ask to get the business involved, the question that I use often is when you're talking to the business people is, what can't you do, or what are you having problems doing that you really need to do to operate your business, because your data, I'll just say your data stinks. I'll use a nicer word, because your data doesn't support your ability to do that. And then there's a second question, which is, what would you do, or what could you do if you had the faith and the confidence to do that? And it's like opening a spigot when you're talking to the business, because they'll tell you what's preventing them from being efficient and effective. And they'll tell you what they want to be able to do. But again, coming back to the original part of the conversation is, these things aren't going to change on their own. They need an intentional effort to resolve these issues. So now I just want to touch real quickly on the embedded part as well. I know I'm running out of time, but it kind of picks up where we left off on the first subject. Governance is already taking place. You don't have to go out and assign people to be data stewards. And that's a favorite thing to do. I say recognize the people in the organization who are already defining, producing, and using data, and help them to do it more formally and more effectively. And then if you consider the idea that any process in itself is a form of governance, then applying the right people at the right time in those processes is really what governance is all about. I used to refer to it as the Data Governance Bill of Rights, with the word rights in quotes. Getting the right people involved at the right time for the right reason, it'll result in good data, at least most of the time.
No, and you're spot on. And I think, when companies are trying to implement data strategies, and usually data governance is a piece of that, they often volunteer people in the organization, oh, you're going to be a data owner, or, oh, you're going to be doing this. And that never works out for them. And then they wonder why. Because that person, Karen in accounting, she's busy closing books every month and getting out invoicing and things like that. If you just volunteer her and pile on, Karen might not be in your accounting department.
You're already a data steward.
Right.
This is not new to you. We don't need to give you a title of a data steward. If you are defining or producing or using data and you are being held accountable for how you do that, you are a steward. Look in the dictionary. The definition of stewardship is taking care of something for somebody else. And that's why we shouldn't use the word owner either, because owner implies exactly the opposite of what steward means.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Wow, you referenced something so basic that I think everyone can grasp.
Well,
So
it's not new, right, Bob? It's not new.
It's not new. We're just not using the right words. So let's be real. If we start talking to executives about metadata and data catalogs, we're going to lose them faster than a drop database connection. So the data governance conversation needs a new language, one that speaks to revenue, risk, efficiency, and competitive advantage. Winning leadership buy-in, it starts with flipping this narrative from technical to tactical. And leaders just won't engage until we start speaking their language. So one of my favorite quotes from this statement is when someone says governance is slowing us down, they're really saying we're okay with producing unmeasurable and unverifiable results, which I hate to hear that, but it probably is really true. Mindy, why do leadership teams often resist data governance initiatives?
I think it goes back to your statement that governance, immediately people think that governance means government and that it is being a controlling factor, and that it immediately is about 100% control. It is about security, and it is all about just a lockdown of information, that it is an IT function. It is solely about maintaining information security, that it is not about an enablement of business processes at a faster pace, and it is about using their information to do their business at the best that their business can be working. And I don't think it's even seen as a part of a process to get better market advantage. I don't think that it's thought of as information as part of a business. Like, I think it's back to them not thinking of their business being a data business. Like, I think when people think of thinking, they still think of that they're in the loan business, or that they are in the consumer business, or that Apple is a computer business, or that they are a phone business. None of these companies anymore are that business. I mean, cars sell luxury items, or, purses. That's the businesses that they're in, and they do that from information. So we have to start rethinking the narrative too. Like, when we are selling data governance, we are selling data enablement. We are now evangelists of information. That's what we're doing. So how are we changing the narrative? And that's going through non-evasive data governance. And that's talking also, I mean, there are DGIQ and other areas about how are we discussing and changing, just like this, the narrative of information. So I think it's through all of that.
I completely agree. Bob, what messaging actually resonates with our executives? What are the words and the languages we should be speaking to them?
I think the
And
problem
with
is
them,
I think the problem is that it resonates. It's that it resonates, but with the message that resonate with the well, first of all, if we can answer that question very simply here, it's the $1 million question. And it's what every consultant is asking. It's what every practitioner in an organization is asking is how are we going to crack that shell and get this message through? And I think it starts with what John and I put together in the narratives, in the changing the narrative statement, is they got to understand that they're already governing. Okay, that they don't need to look for ROI, return on investment from data governance. They need to look everywhere else where they are investing in artificial intelligence, in analytical platforms, in ERP and CRM platforms for the organization, and recognize that these things are all based on data. Kind of going back to what Mindy said, every company, what runs the company is the data. So every company is a data company. So what resonates with them is that, first of all, we got to understand what their misconceptions are. So I think we should ask them. That's the simplest way, is just to ask them what they understand about governance, but then kind of wipe the slate clean and start over with some of those common notes of we're already governing, that we're doing it informally, that these problems, and I know I'm repeating myself, but these problems aren't going to resolve themselves. I think the biggest misstep, or one of the biggest missteps, is that they're looking for ROI specifically from data governance. Data governance doesn't cost a lot of money. I mean, the tools might cost you a lot of money, but it's a people behavior discipline. Okay, so if they are going to get their return on investment, AI doesn't care where it gets its data from, whether it's structured data, unstructured, semi-structured data. So we need to govern we need to govern all of our data. And so we need to let them know that, you know what, we're already doing this. It's not this big, scary thing. It's everything that John said about all these industries that are already governing. They're governing everything, but their data formally. And so I think if we're going to get a message through to the executives, we need to change the way that we're telling them and get them to understand this is not new. We are already doing this. We can do this better. Our problems won't self-resolve. I'm on a broken record today.
No, and we have to continue to pound these messages home. We're still talking. We've been telling everybody data quality is important. Data quality is important. Data quality is important. And now they're kind of hearing from tools, our AI will fix it. No, we're not governing our data. Therefore, we're not going to be able to govern our AI. And quantum, which is going to be the next big thing, it has zero tolerance for bad data quality. Zero. You can't have it. You can't implement quantum if you have bad data. So I think we are a broken record about this. John, how do we connect governance to things leadership really cares about? Bob, said it's not about ROI, but it is about revenue. It is about risk and compliance. It's about efficiency. And it is about, I'm not just going to say AI readiness, but really next generation technology readiness, whatever that is now and whatever that is that's coming at us.
Well, it's only next, hit the readiness thing first, because that grills my cheese. It's not about tech readiness. It's the same thing. We have this thing now called AI governance, and everyone's saying you need separate AI governance. If you're using data to do something, whether it's AI or analytics or a Power BI dashboard, it's data. The data has to be right. So how do you connect that message of all of that stuff with leadership is the real question. Now, Mindy hit on it. She used a bunch of words earlier, but she meant really go through an alignment exercise. Right. And the first thing I do when I'm packaging this stuff is it doesn't matter what client I've had over the years. I take the annual report or the documents or strategic something, and I do a formal statement of what are the data needs, not wants. I never ask anyone a requirements question. I have not done a requirements interview in 15 years, right? Because you get a stupid answer. All right. So what we do is say, here's what the organization needs. You have to formally do alignment. That's what they call ROI. A really good CEO knows they need this stuff. I have sat in a room with the heads of some of the largest banks on this planet, and they say, yeah, I know my controller wants an ROI. Well, he's a good dude, but ignore him. All right. I know we've got to do this because they're smart people. But you've got to connect all this activity to what this person needs to have more customers, lower costs, and expand our markets. Period. End of discussion. Because that's what the board wants to hear. There is no language to the board of directors other than more customers, more revenue, lower cost, regulatory compliance. That's all they want to hear. And they only want to hear it once a quarter. All right. So that we have to connect what we do to that. Bottom line, everything out of that is window dressing. Okay, is data governance an enabling or not? So what? That's their term. We got to do metadata and catalog. So what? That's your job. I don't want to hear about that kind of stuff. Well, what do they want to hear? How are you going to help me get more customers or dominate my market or something like that? If you're going to talk enablement, the next breath, you need to connect those two things together. In the very next breath, if you say enablement because you're going to make better decisions, get your reports quicker because we're going to have a catalog, you've lost the battle. The battle's over right there. I could go on. This is another kind of pet peeve, but I think I'm at my 3 minutes, so I'm gonna defer back on this one.
You guys are doing so good, and we do have a couple questions, so I know the audience will appreciate you.
Yeah, I saw some of them. I saw.
I'm gathering them, so we're gonna get to them.
I want to dive
on one of these. All right.
We're gonna let you. Let's keep rolling. Let's keep jamming, as we say, for our jam session. So governance for governance sake, it's not gonna get us very far unless we're trying to win that compliance bingo game. If your data governance efforts aren't tied directly to business outcomes, they'll be the first thing cut when budgets tighten. So let's talk about how to anchor governance in measurable value, drive adoption, and ensure that it becomes a part of the fabric of your organization. Because governance, it must drive real measurable outcomes or it won't survive. So Bob, what does a results-driven governance program actually look like?
See, I think we're asking the wrong question. I think that we should be asking so I would say we should say, what does a results-driven AI program look like? Or what does a results-driven analytics program look like? Okay, because they're all going to require good data in order to be successful. And so I've always said that look for the results coming from these other things that they're not caring about. The data is not the thing that is first and foremost in the executives' minds. It's taking advantage of the new technologies and taking advantage of the new analytical platforms and all of these things. And the connection that we need to make to them is that all of these things are data focused. And so, yes, we want to become data results driven. We want to have results driven governance, but we really want to be a results driven company. And so I think this comes back to what Mindy and what John said, is that we've got to tie this to business value. Mm-hmm. And if we can tie this directly to business value, they're going to tune us out as quickly as we enter the room. They'll forget about us as when we leave the room.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, NextThing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
John, I think you've hit on it, but it doesn't hurt to say it again and again. How do we measure governance success beyond compliance?
That was Mindy's question, but I can answer that.
Do I have it backwards?
He said, referring to the script. Mine is, what are some examples of governance enabling innovation?
Go then. Go.
All right.
Take it. Run.
Yeah, that's okay.
You prepped what you prepped, so that's on me.
We're self-governing here. Extending what Bob said.
Govern flexible.
Okay. Governance and data. Governance is not separate from other things. It's not an option. All right. Everyone says, well, how do we do the program and how do we set? If you're going to do data management, if you're going to use data, you are eventually mandatory going to have to figure out some type of controls and all of that. The thing that's really causing us the issue here is this results driven and enablement stuff. And I'm working on some research on this, but we're trying to find the right words because there's a line of thinking in our profession now that data governance using the one term to encompass the mundane and the enabling may not be what we want to do. That there's some sort of bifurcation in concept here. So we have the mundane, all right. What does results-driven governance program look like, and which is Bob's, and then what are some examples of that? Data quality improves, all right. People can get the reports they want. Now, but that's kind of the mundane things that what I now call legacy governance. But what about this enabling cool stuff? Make AI work, make analytics work. Well, the examples there is every time you find a good analytics program where someone has, answered the unasked question, or the AI has come up with a new product. Did you know you could do this or you could do that with that? If you look underneath that, you will find that they fed that model what it needed to get, and it was accurate and it was correct, and somebody took the time to do it, whether or not it was the actuary or the data scientist, but somebody took the time to do it, or they said, this is garbage, we need 2 years to clean this up, and then we'll come back and do it. Conversely, when you see stuff that hasn't worked, because you still have 70% of analytics efforts don't deliver expectations, 80% of AI works are not delivering. You've got AI taking over the world at the same time. Boards of directors are going, we're the stupidest kids on the block because ours isn't working, when it really is pretty much no one else's is either, right? But when you look at that, they're the ones without the data oversight. They're the one without taking care of the data. I mean, it's kind of obvious, all right? If you take care of that, the data is the raw material of a supply chain that, as Mindy said, produces 21st century company results. And if you don't take care of your supply chain, you're gonna get what you deserve. I'll hand it over. And now we have the.
I couldn't agree with that more, and that's a really great way to put it, because I mean, we've used all these words about about data. It's the new oil. It's the new fuel,
Which is bogus.
You nailed it. It's your supply chain.
That's
So,
what it is. Yes.
yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think that resonates with executives. And I feel like more leadership and more executives should feel comfortable in admitting that's not working for us. What are we doing? And then asking, what are we doing wrong? What's not right? So they can get the help instead of being, I'm not saying ashamed, but I don't think everyone talks. Companies don't talk about their failures as often as they talk about their successes. And I think we have to be a little more open and a little more vulnerable about where we're struggling and maybe not failing, so we can get input and we can get help and we can right our ships faster instead of just struggling through it. So Mindy, how do we measure governance success beyond compliance?
Okay. Thank you. And thanks, Jen, because I did prep on this one. So I appreciate you leaving it for me. One, I do think we do need to think about it as a compliance, just because although I don't want governance to only be compliance, it is a big part. We, as a nation and internationally, do still need to also always think about compliance and think about what it means when we aren't compliant about things. And for legislative reasons, but also for privacy reasons and otherwise. So I just wanted to plug that part of it. But outside of that, I think what we've all talked about through this, what it means as the impact on business. I think that that's the thing that we need to think about. And that's how we should be structuring this, is how government is impact on business is really the measurement and that things should be going by. And what I think is the more exciting part of data governance and how we will measure things and how it should be measured going forward, because it's the improvement of business and how people think through things and how I get more excited about information every day because of AI. I mean, jumping on the AI bandwagon because it can make a cool picture every now and again is fun. I like that. But thinking through how it helps solve mysteries and improves health faster because it can zoom through photos, that's exciting. If people are getting better results and they're getting a faster prognosis and people are being healed faster, that's amazing. And they're doing that with information and data. That's fantastic. If we are getting to better, the information that's out there that are getting through to people and business strategy, those are the kinds of things that information's helping with. And I think that to know that knowing where information's at and defining information and those kinds of things that is data governance functions that can help and go forward, that it is data enablement and otherwise that we can work through is great. I think that that's what we're all saying, that those are the things that we have to start aligning and working through to help with.
So can I propose that we suggest out of this, since we're jamming pretty good, we suggest something for people to think about. So the term enablement. So people have said we should change the name of data governance to data enablement. I know this is one of John's pet peeves.
Well, that's the bifurcation. That's what I was talking about.
But what I want to say is, let's replace the word enablement. If we want to make this exciting, all those things Mindy just talked about, they're exciting. They're where the value comes from having good data. Let's not use the word enablement. Let's talk about data governance as a catalyst, as kind of that thing that sparks the explosion into the organization. All those things that Mindy just talked about and how valuable they are. Having good data is going to be the catalyst to making that happen. So I would like to suggest that we kind of strike the word enablement because it's become kind of drab or ho-hum, at least from my opinion.
I can only agree with that to a point. All right. Because auditing is very similar. The auditing is very similar to data governance. It's application of this is the way you're supposed to do things. All right. And auditing is not a catalyst. All right. So and this is why there's more research being done. And guys, I don't have the answer. There's a part of governance which is boring. There's a part of what we do which is auditing. All right, which is just ticking off boxes and all that. And then there's the part that's the exciting, and you don't have auditing bifurcated that way. Or
that's
how
true. And I think that
we have work to do. We
everything
have some research to do.
with the risk management and the compliance and the regulatory.
That's another part.
You're right. That's not necessarily a catalyst to new ideas and innovation and those types of things. So I understand. So maybe
but it does keep the balance sheet healthy. The common thread here, it all comes down to that the organization is healthier, right? But there's a whole lot of paths to that.
Balance between enablement and being a catalyst. The enablement is to do all the things that we have to do. That I'll check in all those boxes that you were mentioning, John. but it also can be a catalyst. Again, we're changing the narrative. We want to get executives excited about this stuff.
Yes. We
And
want
so
to have people
there's gotta be
Excited
that
about
spark
audit.
there. There's got to be that.
No,
I
we
want
do.
enough people excited about auditing so I can do the other stuff that I'm excited about. I want plenty of people to be excited about auditing. Sure.
hey,
I like auditing and forensic accounting. That's fun stuff.
Yes, it is. And that's that's where you're going to get the CEO and you're going to get the board when you say all this stuff that we're spending money on and we can't go, we don't have time for the numbers and all of that, but I've got the numbers. All this time we spend on overhead around data, that overhead goes away. Oh, they're going to be very excited. They're going to be very, very excited. And that is, for some people, that's exciting. Other people, they'd rather get a root canal. But for some of us, that's exciting.
All right, we have some time left, and we have two really great questions, at least of what I've grabbed so far. And I'm so glad that we have so many live participants here, and I want to make sure that we get to those questions. And I think honestly, the lightning rounds that we had planned, I think you guys have hit on most of those. So, but if we have a little bit of time before closing out, we can get to maybe a fun quick round. So Clifford asks, given data governance should be owned by the business, what role does the CDO play?
Well, what do you call a CDO? Chief Data Officer, as designed, as defined, and thought about, was that point where the oversight of an asset and the exploitation of that asset comes together. You have a CFO where you oversight over the financial asset and exploitation of the financial asset. Business 101 again, folks. Sorry, go back to your 100 level business classes. All right. If this gives you a headache, go back to school. All right. All right. That's finance. Now let's apply the same thing to data. All right. You've got the oversight function and the exploitation of the asset. All right. If a CDO is not in that role and equivalent to the CFO and reporting to, then they are merely a top data administrator and they're not really a CDO. And most CDOs are not really, by definition, chief data officers. But if they are, then it's a perfectly normal thing to be that point where the governance, the oversight branch, do the right things and doing things right come together. Because you've got that with the financial officer, you've got that with the HR resources, you've got that with your operations. That's where everything comes together. It's perfectly normal. There shouldn't be anything hard to grok on that at all.
Any other thoughts on that one?
I think he nailed it. I think the oversight and the exploitation. The exploitation is what we just talked about. It's that catalyst. What are we going to do to take advantage of the data that we have?
Yep.
So I think that the oversight is completely required. There is a shift happening in the industry where there's less chief data officers and more chief data and analytics or chief data and AI officers.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing that John said about the oversight and the exploitation, that's got to be related to AI too. It's got to be related to analytics too. We've got to be able to prove that we're following regulatory controls, even in our analytics environments. But the question is, if there's not somebody who's kind of guiding the ship to how can we exploit this in the organization, John, I'm going to borrow that from you, the oversight and exploitation. I think that just kind of nailed what that role is.
You and I agree. Yeah, you and I agree. Shift happens. Yeah, we agree. Shift happens.
No, and I mean, and Bob, you said it earlier, we're asking the wrong question. It's not what does a results-driven governance program, what does a results-driven data program look like, analytics program, AI program, and that might be why we're seeing that shift in that C-level role to CDAO or CDAIO.
CDEIO. I think it's going to be
Bingo. Oh, good. All right. We have another question, and I'm going to let Mindy take a stab at it first because I think it's in her realm as well. If you are currently responsible for DG sitting in the IT department, how do you influence the move to the business line or side? So thank you, Marissa, for that, or Larissa, for that question.
I think actually you start looking at who, and I know, Bob, you were like, let's not call them stewards, let's not call them owners. But I think you start looking at who is using the information now, and you start looking at who's using it, how they're using it, and flip the narrative as to that, and then start pushing them as they're the users of it, and really they're the owners of it. And that's the conversation that should have been happening prior to now. I mean, IT is more of the, if you've ever think of it as a car shop, I mean, IT is just maintenance of information. They've never been the owners of information. They've never consumed. They are just simply maintaining information for all of the other people that own it. It's just the pass through. So it's pushing all of the responsibility back to the business, but it's a tricky navigation, and I'll freely admit to that. I know that it would be a rough negotiation if everybody has seen it as an IT function prior to now. They're like, no, it's your job, and you're trying to give me your job. I don't need to take your job, but start recognizing back to, well, this is your role. I mean, who wants to be responsible for the numbers? You want Nancy in accounting to own it. You definitely don't want me in IT to own it. You don't want me to know what that is. So start having Nancy own it, and start having Nancy take care of it instead. So that's kind of where to start with the conversations, I would say.
And the fact is, somebody needs to administer the program. Somebody needs to run. So if it's in IT and somebody in IT is administering the program, but they're recognizing the stewards or recognizing the owners, I don't like that word, but recognizing these people, the people on the Data Governance Council are not, IT may be represented, but IT does not make up the whole Data Governance Council. The Executive Steering Group for Data and AI is made up of business leaders across the organization. The subject matter experts around the data are not IT. So if it's facilitated and it's administered out of IT, that's where I disagreed with John. I said that, yeah, it can reside in IT. I've seen it reside in IT. And it doesn't mean it's going to fail, but if it's looked at as being an IT initiative for IT's sake, the chances are you're going to get a lot less business attention.
Well, and a lot of IT is outsourced these days. Do you want IT making those decisions for you? Do you want an outside decision maker? I mean, start thinking through those two. I mean, start adding that to your conversation. Do you want Mindy at Right Triangle making those choices for you every day? I mean,
Well, we'd let you have the whole thing, Mindy. You seem pretty bright, but
thank you.
yeah, your point is well taken. And the scary part is that a lot of organizations don't know enough about this. They're illiterate about this, to the point where they would outsource it if some McKinsey type gazillion-dollar an hour consultant told them to do it. They wouldn't even hesitate to do it. All right, so that's kind of scary when you think of it.
So Clifford and Larissa, thank you for your questions. It's time to wrap this up. I'm going to start, well, it's clockwise to me. I'm not sure how the viewers are seeing it, but I'm going to start with Bob. How can viewers best get in touch with you virtually? Any upcoming conferences or speaking engagements where people can see you in person, or any new books coming out or that have recently come out?
Well, I just put out a book in 2025 earlier this year. So there's 3 books on non-invasive data governance. One called Non-Invasive Data Governance. The second one called Non-Invasive Data Governance Strikes Again, because it had to be struck once in order for it to strike again. And then the most recent one is Non-Invasive Data Governance Unleashed. They're not 3 editions of the same book. They're all fresh books. I am very often posting things on LinkedIn. So please connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. I do a monthly webinar series with Dataversity that I've been doing for 12, 13 years now. That's a lot of webinars. I think we're up to 161 in the series. And I speak at a lot of events. I mean, I'm happy. I participate at Insight Jam. I post articles and narratives and things like that there. I'm very free with my time. So if people have questions, they can feel free to reach out to me at rsigner@kikconsulting.com too.
Great.
Again, KIK, knowledge is king, not BS.
John, best way to get in touch with you virtually, conferences, speaking engagements, books.
Best way to get a hold of me is email, john@ladley.biz. That's on my website, which is very creatively called johnladley.com. The best way to hear from me and what I'm thinking is truly on the Rock Bottom Data Feed podcast. That's Rock Bottom Data Feed. It's on Spotify, Apple, all those things, and on YouTube, but it's boring because it's just voice. That is the first of several podcasts that I'm working on with a very great fellow consultant named Mark Cooper. Speaking engagements, nothing much. Books. Third edition of the data governance book is coming out late 25, early 26. Another book on data debt, which is a new way to look and a new way to talk to leadership, is coming out late 25, early 26. And every so often I'm spitting out an article with Bob, Malcolm Hawker, Tom Redman, folks like that here going on. And then sometime in 2026, I'll be making an announcement on a new organization that I will be in my retirement handing over to the industry in some way, shape, or form to keep this thinking and this type of stuff we're doing now funded and active and things like that. So stay tuned. That's all I got on the calendar now, unless my wife hasn't told me something. I don't know. So that's it.
It sounds like a lot. So we'll keep our eyes out for that announcement. Mindy, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Any upcoming conferences or speaking engagements? I know you well, but I don't think you've written a book yet, have you?
No, I have not written a book. Maybe someday.
Get there.
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn or find Right Triangle Consulting on LinkedIn or online at righttriangle.com. And if you are in the Kansas City area, Right Triangle has BI the last Wednesday of every month. So coming up on 6/25, you can find us at Boulevard Brewery here in Kansas City. BI serves both business intelligence and beer intelligence.
That's where I've seen you, Mindy. I go to the OP all the time.
Yeah, and then I will also be at the CDOIQ in Cambridge at the next month. So I will be there in person as well.
That is coming up. Well, to wrap up, let's face it, data governance has had a bit of a PR problem, but it's not just some joyless compliance monster lurking in our server rooms. It is the unsung hero of every good decision your business makes. So if we want to thrive in an AI-fueled, data-saturated world, we've got to stop treating governance like a tedious paperwork exercise and start embracing it as the GPS for responsible strategic growth. The future belongs to those who can manage data with confidence, not chaos. So whether you're that CDO, a data steward, or someone who just accidentally became the data person, it is time to suit up. Governance isn't going away, neither is our government. And with the right approach, it might just be the smartest move you and your organization make all year. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share on your favorite social media channels. Robert Eve returns to the jam session on Friday, June 20th, exploring It's Time to Get Smart about data intelligence. And I will see some of you in person at Denver Dev Day at the end of the month. Until next time, stay curious and always be evolving.